I'm Mike Dean, your expedition leader.
Oh, Hans Reinhardt.
Hans Reinhardt.
From Germany.
From Germany. When did you come over to London? Today to catch the trip?
Yes, only to catch the trip.
Do you know your passport number?
No, I have to look for it.
All right, fine. Well, you let me know before Dover. Anyhow. What's your name?
Don.
Don.
Pugh.
Pugh.
Hello, I'm the owner. I'm Dave Jones. Hans from Germany.
Hans. Wild. Tony. Okay. See you all in Dover then. Have a good trip.
Istanbul at dawn, the voice of Islam calls the faithful to prayer. Its echoes wake the wanderlust in every tourist. Those who travel light and who like to get off the beaten track can book a seat in a 12-ton truck on an overland expedition from Europe to Nepal. One expedition leader, Mike Dean, aged 28, has been driving this road to Kathmandu for 3 years.
The people on these trips usually come from diverse backgrounds and occupations.
Right, here we are.
On this particular trip, we've got Susie, who's a professional photographer from New Zealand. There's Tanya, who's a secretary from London. Paul, who's a student from Canada. Ivan, a lifeguard from Australia. Valerie, a nurse from England. Peter, who's a Dutchman, and he's a carpenter. We've got a couple of Cockney lads, Paul and Jim. And the age group would be about 19 to 30.
There's Sophia.
Istanbul is our first stop. It's really our entry into Asia, which makes it significant. It's also a very fascinating place. It is, despite the cliché, a mixture of East and West.
As the 12-tonner drives over deserts and mountains on its way to the back of beyond, its occupants will have their passports stamped 27 times during their 3 months' journey. From London to Kathmandu by air is only 4,500 miles, but the truck's heavy-duty tires will have covered 11,000 miles by the journey's end.
I worked for a firm of stockbrokers in the City of London. I was involved very much in doing investment analysis for mining stocks mainly, visiting companies that I would then write investment reports upon. I was beginning to be a bit of a whiz kid. I had all the things, a fast sports car, a nice flat, dining out several times a week. I think subconsciously became jaundiced with the way of life that I was leading. One rainy winter morning when I woke up and I just couldn't face going into an underground train, and I just decided that was it and I wasn't going to do it anymore. The southern coast of Turkey gives passengers their first feel of adventure I think for all of our passengers, the lure of adventure is paramount. They could travel by plane. They could even travel in an air-conditioned coach. So there must be something that makes them choose to ride in the back of a truck. There are those who are on the trip purely for a holiday, to enjoy themselves the best they can. Lots of sun, lots of sea, lots of booze. Others are making a kind of a cultural pilgrimage, if you like. They do get very interested, very involved in the countries they're travelling through. They want to see as much as they possibly can of the various archaeological sites. All the way along there, they would have had their sort of dressing rooms and administrative rooms and so on, and then there's a tunnel which goes through from those ruins you see there right into the floor of the stage, and that's where the actors would have...
What would they have done? Just acting? Would there have been lions and things?
It was mainly dramatic performances and sort of choral works, I think, and so on. They had a very stylized...
It's terribly high up the top there. People at the back really were miles from the stage.
Yeah, but you find the acoustics in there are absolutely fantastic.
Really?
I mean, yeah, if you go and stand in the middle, and the rest of the group stands around the top up there, and you just talk in an ordinary speaking voice, the whole lot of them will hear you. It's amazing. It's undoubtedly the most difficult aspect of my job, to balance out the priorities which different people on these trips have. 3 months for a trip sounds like a long time, but there is so much to do and so much to see. There's no real formula. I have to play it by ear. As the trip develops, I get to know the personalities on the trip and to learn what their priorities are, and consequently to attempt to satisfy everybody as fully as they can be. My first reaction when I saw the valleys of Cappadocia was that it really did look like the moon. And then when one got a bit closer and found these dwellings inside the rock pinnacles, it was really quite fascinating to think that people had been living there for centuries. The original inhabitants of Cappadocia were Christians who were retreating from the invading Muslims. These Christians intended to camouflage themselves and hope that the tide of Islam would wash over them. But inevitably, as Islamic settlements grew up around the Cappadocian region, the Christians were pushed out. There are times when it is jolly cold. In eastern Turkey, for instance, which is very high, very rough, tough sort of a country, and very windswept, it can get very cold indeed. We find it quite a hardship to sleep in -0 temperatures for perhaps 2 or 3 nights. But that sense of adventure has to be, I think, slightly diminished when we consider that the Kurds have been living like this for centuries, and in much colder parts than we sleep in, and they do it every day of the year. The Kurds are very tough people. They have to cope with a lot of physical hardship, and yet they seem to have a great sense of affection, together with a great dignity. When we visit Kurds, they look at our shiny trucks and our shiny cameras and our nylon anoraks and so on. Yes, they're interested by them, they come and finger them, they look at them, but they're not dependent upon it, and I think they're rather amused by us when we visit them.
Wakey, wakey! Come on, you lot. The big hands on the 12, the little ones on the 6.
This type of trip is basically a camping trip, and it is rough camping. There are certain things one learns never to do when camping in the wild, and that is, for instance, not to camp in, say, a wadi. Even though it looks as if it hasn't rained for 2 centuries, a flash flood can take the whole lot away.
Oh, well, that's really cute. I think I have one for Sue.
Oh, I admit I made it.
Oh, man. Any problems?
Oh, this is a good one. Good bloke.
It's very important that the passengers should feel that they are responsible for the destiny of that trip and also for its day-to-day running. Groups of 3 usually will do the cooking on a specific day. They will also do the shopping in the local bazaars.
7 rupees 1 kilo.
7 rupees?
Yes. 1 kilo.
7 rupees a kilo?
I think they're okay actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, you pick out
They
a
look
few
a bit
there,
green.
okay.
That's right. We got 8 in there. That was the first 1.5 kilo.
Around about 30.
It's hard telling whether they're ripe or not, but I think they're all soft inside.
Yeah.
You know, they're good inside. They're just.
It's 24 we got in there, right? That's all it is now.
I'm a bit suspicious of this scale method he uses, you know.
Yeah.
I think it depends on how he sort of holds it up in his hand.
That'd be the lot then? Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. Love doing these, right?
Start with 5 and if there's not enough, then use the other one.
Yeah, it should be enough. I'm getting an average of about 12 slices.
See, the tomatoes have gone back to their normal shape after being more like plums before.
The quality of the food on these trips can vary enormously. I've had cordon bleu cooks on trips who've produced the most revolting meals. On the other hand, I've had people who never cooked in their lives consistently producing very palatable meals.
Spend my money.
We require someone to administer the cash with which we make all our food purchases, and I usually try to find someone who has an accountancy background to do it.
So the total amount spent in that country was 11,396.
I don't like to consider myself as a type of courier, a guide, and I don't think I'd really like my passengers to consider me that either. Certainly it gives me a lot of pleasure to introduce people to new pleasures, new cultures and so on.
First stop in Iran will be Isfahan, where we'll spend 2.5 days. There's a hell of a lot to see there, and you'll have to ration yourselves.
Isfahan is a very beautiful city. It's dominated by the mosaic domes of the really quite old mosques and theological colleges there. In the bazaars in Isfahan, you will often find a Persian housewife doing her shopping in really the same way that an English housewife might go into a supermarket. There's an enormous range of handicrafts in Isfahan. The interesting thing about all these handicrafts is that these are crafts primarily created for the Persian. Take the example of brassware. The amount of work which goes into beating it out is terrific. Yet you will find in virtually any Persian household that these brassware pots are being used.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, welcome to Isfahan. These are all original paintings. These are by imagination. And we use the very nice matter from our literature, from Omar Khayyam. Omar Khayyam was a famous popular poet, and he has very nice stories about peaceful life. You know, these are all by imagination. We have no model. We read the literature, the story of Omar Khayyam, and we make the figures like this, the sketch, and then color. And the faces that we paint in our painting is not flat. It's just by detail.
Yeah.
The shadow, the color in the face. Magnificent faces, just one by one, the color in the face. And the brush that we use is cat hair brush. It's very, very fine brush. Just one hair on the top of my brush. So when I finish one painting, it takes 1 month. Or some of them is more than 1 month, is 1 year. For instance, that seven Adventure of Rostam. That takes 1 year to paint.
These representations of the various tributaries that brought annual tribute to the Persian emperor, each figure represents a sort of different nationality. There would have been Babylonians and Scythians, Armenians, and so on. And you can see they're all carrying something. At least those ones there are. I think the ones there with the lances are members of the guard escorting them in to see the emperor.
This is in fact one of his spring palaces, was it?
Yeah, Darius stayed here in the spring, and then in the winter he'd travel up to his other palace at Akbatana, which is modern Hamdan. And it's fantastic when you think of the distances that they covered every year just to visit their palaces. For something like 1,600 miles at 1 mile an hour.
It sometimes happens that a passenger turns out to know more about a particular place than I do. It sometimes happens that I make a mistake in a description, and I'm pulled up on it pretty sharpish. I'm delighted when this happens because I don't pretend to be an expert. I'm learning as much as they are.
Right, we'll have a look at the oil baths.
Yeah.
Probably change the oil now. When we go into the desert, we'll have to check the oil regularly every day. And possibly...
When I started in this game, my mechanical ability was virtually nil on the road. I now reckon that I could handle any problem on a diesel engine truck. The vehicles that we use for these expeditions are built by ourselves. We purchase a basic chassis and we put onto it a military body with our own designed cover with clear windows in, and the sides of this can roll up in a number of combinations so that people can be exposed to the country they're travelling through. The great beauty of these is that although at times they can let in the cold, you do get a lot more physical contact with the countries you're travelling through. I think it's true to say that the majority of people who go on these trips leave the trip at the end changed to some degree, in some aspect, from the person who joined that trip. Certainly, the problems that they've come through as a group, problems of interrelation between themselves, problems of tolerance, problems which are exacerbated by sometimes tiredness, sometimes discomfort, could really blow a group apart if people didn't learn that kind of tolerance. And I think it's the kind of tolerance which will stay with them forever. Yeah, that's one of the water systems I was telling you about. If you look at the brick construction around the walls, I think that they find adventure in their contacts with the countries that they go through, which they realize after the event is adventure. It doesn't have to be dramatic or exciting or dangerous to be adventure. And it's the draft which keeps the water nice and cool. It's really interesting how they managed to build the whole thing up. The journey across the Iranian desert takes 4 days. Fairly long, hot, dusty driving. But the monotony is broken up by caravanserais where we spend our nights. Traditionally, the caravanserais were sited 1 day's march by camel away from each other. We cover in 4 days the same distance across the desert as the camel trains would have taken 16 days to 3 weeks to cover. Herat marks our entrance into Afghanistan. There's a gun fired every day at noon. But I've always wondered how it is that the gunner sets his watch. Does he do it by the gun, or does he fire the gun according to his watch? The realities of travelling in distant parts, I think undoubtedly have to be different from one's imaginings. To me, an Afghan was some figure from a woodblock print in a book about India. The reality of an Afghan was so beyond that, their strength of character which comes through in their most simple action. For the normal traveller, there is only one route through Afghanistan, the southern road, and this is asphalted. There are two other ways, the central route, which goes high into the Hindu Kush, and on this particular occasion, we tried the northern route.
So you've got to run them back absolutely straight. Yeah. The minute you tilt your front wheels, it just won't take. Got it?
I think the northern route has proven to be more of a challenge than any road I have done. There are invariably hazards on this trip. Physical hazards. These really involve the vehicle and the roads that we're travelling on. A large proportion of the trip is on dirt roads. A fair proportion of it is on tracks which would turn a hardened truckie's hair grey through mountain passes, rutted hairpin bends. One's driving ability is very taxed on this. You have to know exactly to the inch where all four wheels are, because it is possible to drop a wheel over the edge. We were hit by a sandstorm crossing a small desert called the Dashti Laili. It was most unexpected. It hit us really very suddenly. You have to stop. You can't see where you're going, and you have to batten everything down to protect the passengers from driving sand, because the force of the wind can really rip things off the vehicle. Then attempt to get some kind of landmarks before the visibility went completely. The sand does obliterate your tracks, and you really can't tell where you are, where you've come from, and where you're going to. Then you see some Afghan come dozing out of the sand, hardly give you a look, and carry on past. You long to ask, where are you going? Where have you come from? But he just disappears into the murk, going about his everyday business. These wild areas of Afghanistan, the deserts and the mountains, which to us are really pretty adventurous, have in fact been travelled by man and beast since travelling began. very interesting to see the reactions of Western people thrown into this way of life. Some of them can't bear it if they can't have at least 2 washes a day. Although one can spend a number of days dusty and miles from the nearest shower, when we do hit somewhere where there is running water, then that is undoubtedly a high point in the day's travel. If one compares the cultures of the kind of society that we live in with the culture of the countries that I've been travelling in for the last 2 years, I feel that we've lost an awful lot. And I feel that we could learn an awful lot from those countries which we choose to call backward. Their methods may seem rather primitive. They're not very highly mechanised. But I believe they've got the business of living nicely sorted out. The Afghans are immensely hard-working people. The northern region of Afghanistan is the great cotton-growing area. One will, on the road, see vast expanses of cotton being picked in what to us seems to be the most primitive manner. When you watch them loading cotton onto a stockpile, they do it with great zest and great verve and love to crack a joke or two. The Kutchis are probably the classical example of nomads. They have traditionally travelled across frontiers. No one has been able to control them, no one has been able to stop them or to settle them. When a Kutchi tribe moves, the entire tribal property is carried, either on foot or on the backs of animals. Small babies travel on the backs of a camel or a donkey. The Kutchis never seem to get too old to travel. They travel and they die, and they're buried by the side of the trail, where they die. When Genghis Khan conquered Bamiyan, after his nephew was killed in battle there, he ordered that all living things in the Bamiyan Valley, including animals, trees, and the very grass, should be wiped out. Bamiyan never recovered, largely because the irrigation system on which it depended was destroyed. Except for the 2 giant Buddhas, it would be today just another of the forgotten cities on the old Silk Route. "50 miles from Bamiyan and 10,000 feet above sea level, there are the 5 lakes of Bandi-i-Amir. There's a legend involved in the creation of these lakes at Bandi-i-Amir.
which involves yet again Hazrat Ali, who's a great hero of the Muslims. The story is that he had a great disillusionment or a great row with an infidel king called Babar, who at the time was attempting with 1,000 slaves to build a dam across this river, and he was failing. As a result of his contretemps with Ali, Ali lost his temper rather badly and gave a great kick to the mountain up there, and it fell down and dammed the river, and that dam was known as Bandi Haibat, or Dam of Ore. Ali then got his sword, his famous sword Zulfikar, out and smote another chunk of mountain out, and that was the Bandi Zulfikar, the Lake of Zulfikar. A nomad woman nearby who'd seen these mighty feats presented him with a cheese, which he then placed in the river, and that became known as the Lake of the Cheese, or the Bandi Pamir. Then right at the very end, the villagers were somewhat alarmed because their stream had completely dried up, and when Ali had heard of their fears, he merely scraped his 5 fingers across the top of the Bandi Haibat here, which is how you get the continuous flow of water all the way down into the stream.
Noisy, busy, Lahore is a tremendous contrast after the silent mountains of Afghanistan. It's an elegant city, full of monuments from both the British Raj and the Mughal emperors. After 2 months of bumping across Asia in a truck, it's nice to lie back and enjoy Kashmir for a few days. We stay on houseboats on a lake. We're waited upon hand and foot. Tea in bed in the mornings, afternoon tea. The food we get is excellent, either European or purely Kashmiri food.
Is this saffron rice?
It really is quite blissful to be able to sit at a table with white linen and to be waited upon.
Hello. You'd ride on the Shikara?
Yeah.
It's very good, yeah.
Peaceful.
People do a lot of shopping, and all the traders come to the boats and trot out their goods, and invariably sell, because they're very, very good salesmen.
This is groovy and
Groovy flowers,
marvelous,
yeah?
stupendous,
Groovy
magnificent,
Stupendous.
fantastic, very good smell.
Good chocolate. This is peanut candy. See how much? This are about the 3 rupees each. But that's too much. Not too much. We got them cheaper from the other place.
Big size, it's not small size.
Big banana.
Big banana.
you want to go halves them?
This is a long jacket for men. A fur for generation, which goes from mother to daughter. A possum, shalakot. This is antelope. This is moolan, a moolan coat. This is wolf. This is Persian kitten.
Yeah, I was explaining you something about the designing part of it. We transfer that whole design first onto the graph paper like this, make the full drawings of it. And that's all on scale. Then after that, suppose these are the colors to be used in this particular carpet. Each color has got its own mark and number in it. And those very marks and numbers you'll find everywhere over here that gives the color scheme for the carpet. Now that goes to the weaver on the loom. If there are 3 or 4 members working together, one of them will just call out the pattern, the call of the numbers, saying put so many knots of red color, come back, leave so many knots behind, put so many knots of blue color, white color, so on and so forth. Then that's how the designs are done. Now after we get them down, looms, we had to wash them. And this is what they look like when they're all completed. Look at a couple like that one. With the beautiful colors, the design in that one of it. That's like this way. They change the colors to here. Look at it this way, color in it, and then this way, it's quite different.
Has this got any silk in it?
No, it doesn't have any silk in it. It's all in cashmere wool, but since the cashmere wool is very famous in the world, you must be knowing it.
Most people think of Delhi as the capital of British India in the days of the Raj. In fact, it's a city with 2,000 years of history. Sitting at home, looking at the map of Asia, these distant lands seem quite close together. It's difficult to get the idea that after we leave Delhi, there's still 1,000 miles to go on our route to Kathmandu. In this part of India, we're in tourist country, but even though we are by now pretty hardened travellers, none of the group would forgive me if I didn't show them the Taj Mahal. It's my hope that people who start the trip as tourists may end it as travellers. A traveller is someone who proceeds through a country under his own initiative with a certain internal drive to learn, to find out something more than the superficial. The people who come with me are not quite that, otherwise they wouldn't be travelling with me in the first place. But equally, they need not be the sort of person who takes everything that they are told or read in a guidebook at face value. A traveller will question everything. He will not take anything for granted. Benares is, of course, a holy place of pilgrimage which draws Indians from all over the subcontinent. You'll see on the banks of the Ganges many ordinary people, many ordinary Hindus, performing not only their ablutions, but all the disciplines of yoga and the other arts of meditation. Every Hindu aspires to be cremated in order to have his ashes scattered on the Ganges. India is as crowded as one reads about. It is as hot as one reads about. But above all, it's a place of total and continuing pressure. Now, some people love all of these things about India. I personally can't take it for long periods of time, and it makes me long to get back up into the hills. Nepal has this fascination for virtually everybody that I know. I think it's the mountains. People are always attracted to mountains, and Himalayas are very spectacular. The Nepalese people have got a reputation for great warmth and great courage. I think the other thing which attracts people to Nepal so much is the sense of mystery about the country. It was the real Shangri-La, which everybody liked to read about and dream about. And the extraordinary thing is that when you actually get to Nepal, you're not let down in any of these preconceptions of the country. Inevitably, I do get close to people on these trips, for better or for worse. And it is true that at the end of a trip, I do feel a certain sense of loss to see them go their own way. There may have been difficult periods during the trip, but usually by the end, one has a fairly cohesive group, and one which one can identify with quite well. In Kathmandu, we'll say goodbye. They'll go their different ways. I'll spend a month or so in Kathmandu, trekking, servicing the truck, and then I'll pick up a new group, a lot of new faces, and set out on the return journey. Someday maybe I'll get tired of it, but no two trips are ever the same. When they are, I guess I'll quit.
Righto, folks, there you go, Kathmandu. Journey's end. Journey's end.
रामचंद्र का वास थियो पंचवटी वनमा सुर्पना का आई पुगी कुरा गुन्दै मनमा सोध्न लागि रामचन्द्रलाई तिमीको भन के न भ्रमण गर्यो आज घोर जङ्गल वन भन्न लागि सुर्पनाखाले रामचन्द्रका नजिकै गएर भचुपति तिमीलाई आज सेवा गर्छु साथैमा रहेर भन्न लागे रामचन्द्रले मेरी छनै छन मेरा भाइ लक्ष्मणलाई जाऊ बरु भन भगवानले हुर्काइदिने आमा कसले तिमीलाई पहिराइदियो यति राम्रो जामा